Okay, so welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about remote control of computers on a local area network. We've got an example here where I've got 5 computers on a local area network, and I've got my main computer up here on top. And often I would like to remotely turn on these computers, one or more of these computers, for different reasons. For example, every second Tuesday of the month, Windows will generally send updates to your computer. So if these are normally off, it's nice to maybe have a scheduled every second Tuesday of the month that will automatically turn them on so they can get their updates. Another thing I do every night is I like to back up my computers by synchronizing. And a while back we showed you how to write an application in C# that automatically will synchronize or save any new or updated files and folders from one computer to other computers. So I do that like 7 o'clock every night. It automatically does a backup with my own software I wrote. And it would be nice before it did the backup to automatically send a wake-up call to these computers to say, hey, I'm going to back up some files and folders. I'm going to turn this computer on automatically so I can do backups. And if you are just working at one computer and you want to grab a file from a different computer or a copy a file to a different computer, you can just press a button and send a wake-up command to the other computer and remote control it that way. So really nice way to do remote control. And what we're going to do is we're going to show how you can not only wake up the computer, but you can also send a shutdown command over the network to shut computers down. And here is our application that we're going to write in C# Visual Studio Windows Forms. And basically all it's going to do is for my 4 computers, I've got my main computer called supercomputer. You can see it's on and recognized. But these other 4 computers on the network are off. And this one computer does not accept a Wake on LAN, so I have to manually turn it on. But these other 3 can be woken up using the LAN connection. Now, what I can do is I can use check marks to check which ones I want to wake up. And when they're running, I can then hit this shutdown button to shut them off. I also have a function that will go out and scan, do an IP scan to see what Ethernet ports are out there. So let me first select the 3 computers that can accept a Wake on LAN. They're turned off right now, and I'm going to send a Wake on LAN, and you should see them show up on this file explorer. So I'll do Wake on LAN, and here we go. We've got the HP Envy. And we've got the other 2 computers, so now we've got all 4 computers appearing in File Explorer. Now, as far as appearing in File Explorer, I did another video talking about some of the challenges with Windows. Sometimes computers, even though they're set up correctly for file sharing and network visibility, they don't show up in File Explorer. So I just did a video talking about how to configure those so that they do fairly reliably show up here when they're running. So I encourage you to look at that. But here we've got our 4 computers. Again, one doesn't accept the Wake on LAN. But now what I can do is I can hit the shutdown, and you can see these computers go away because they're going to actually shut down. You see, 1 goes down, 2, and then this desktop takes a while, but there it goes, and they've all shut down. So this is how we can remote control our network computers. Before we start, it's important to understand that if you're going to try to wake up computers, you have to have a computer that is physically able to receive commands when it is shut down. Now, if you're just a hobbyist who wants a simple push-button solution that's fun and easy, this isn't for you. There's some things you need to know about how you can configure computers to be able to do what's called Wake on LAN. And it can get kind of complicated, and not every computer is capable of doing it. So let's take a look at some of the details that you need to be aware of if you want to try and implement this. Now, you may have a computer, for example, you might have a laptop that doesn't have an Ethernet port on it, and it might have something like you see here, which is a USB to Ethernet adapter. and you plug your Ethernet cable into the adapter and plug the other end to the USB. Unfortunately, this USB adapter may not be capable of receiving messages when the computer is shut down because it may not be on what's called standby. It may not have voltage applied to it to run the circuitry. So this type of adapter may not allow you to do what's called Wake on LAN. So just keep that in mind. Not every computer is going to be able to do Wake on LAN. You have to have an Ethernet connection or adapter that is capable of receiving commands when the computer is shut down. Now, for example, with desktops where you've got a power supply like this, you'll probably have what's called a 5-volt standby, 5-volt SB, and that feeds 5 volts to the motherboard when the computer is shut off. And that helps to power, for example, your Ethernet adapter so that it can still receive signals even when the computer is shut down. So that's why it's more likely a desktop will have the ability to do what's called Wake on LAN. We also need to be aware of what's called the shutdown state and how that's referred to in your drivers and so on. And what we're talking about, there are different states that your computer can go into. For example, a laptop can be hibernate or sleep, but what we're talking about is totally shut down, and that's called the S5 state. So if you're trying to configure this, keep in mind we're looking at what's called the S5 state. Now, if you're going to leave your computer on sleep or hibernate, that's going to have different requirements, and it may be a lot easier to set up your Wake on LAN if it's in sleep mode, for example, because it's not really shut down. It's just at low power mode. So what we're going to talk about is when you actually turn it off completely, but you've got some sort of 5-volt standby powering your adapter. Now, in order to send a command over Ethernet to a remote computer that is in the S5 or shutdown state, you're going to need to send over Ethernet what's called a magic packet. And all that is a bunch of numbers. And it starts out with, these are the hexadecimal equivalents of 255-255 and so on. So 6 instances of the number 255. And following that, you're sending 16 instances of the MAC address of the computer you're trying to wake up. So this is what's called a magic packet in this format. A bunch of 255s and then 16 instances of whatever your MAC address is of your computer that you're trying to turn on. So we're going to show you in a bit how to find your MAC address, but that's basically all the magic packet is. Now, in the computer that you want to turn on from the shutdown state, you need to do some things to configure it to make it able to do that. So in each target computer, in your BIOS configuration, you need to turn on the S5 Wake on LAN or something like that. Now again, it's going to depend on the BIOS. This is why it gets kind of complicated. Different BIOSes have different terminology, so what you're going to have to do is find some equivalent for your computer. You might have to do some Google searching to find out what the actual setting is to enable Wake on LAN. Then in that computer, in the device manager, you have to go to the Ethernet adapter properties, and typically in the advanced tab, you have to enable Wake on magic packet, or again, might not be that exact terminology, but something like that. Also, that may not be sufficient. You may also have to go into Power Management tab and check all the boxes where it says allow computer to turn off the adapter. So you want the computer to have access to the adapter to turn it on and off. Allow this device to wake the computer. Again, you're setting the adapter properties, and then allow a magic packet to wake the computer. So again, it might not be this exact terminology, but you're going to have to look in the advanced and also power management to make sure you've got all of these things covered. In a laptop, keep in mind you have other alternatives. For example, in the control panel power options, choose what closing the lid does. Select change settings that are currently unavailable. And under shutdown settings, uncheck turn on fast startup. You don't want fast startup turned on. And then save changes. Now again, this can vary with your computer. You may have to do your own research to find out for yours, but it's basically this type of stuff that you need to make sure is set up. Now, shutting down the computer, just so you know, is a fairly straightforward process. You can just shut down, since the computer is powered on at the time, it's receiving commands, so you can just send the shutdown command and all your computers should probably respond to a shutdown. So now before we start developing our code, let's do what a smart engineer would do, and that is kind of think about the basic structure and the design so that we can go in with a little bit of knowledge to make sure that we don't go down some rabbit holes. So what we're going to have to do, we said we're going to have a magic packet sent to each remote computer that we want to wake up. So in order to do that, we said we need a MAC address for each remote computer. And we also want the associated name for that computer so that the user can refer to it by name and also have a MAC address associated with it. So we're going to have to get that information for each computer and store it somewhere in our code so that we can use it for the magic packet. Then we're going to have to create an actual magic packet. As we said before, it's basically just a bunch of numbers, but we're going to have to form that so that we can send it over Ethernet. And then, of course, we're going to have to send it, and we've talked before about how to, in our C# application, how to send information over Ethernet. We talked about TCP/IP, there's also UDP. So we're going to have to think about what format we're going to do, and also if we're going to be sending a bunch of magic packets, we may want to do this asynchronously. So we might be thinking about, having a remote PC class or object, and with it we have our name, our MAC address, and any other information we want to associate with a remote computer. And also maybe we have a class based on all of the functionality surrounding creating the magic packet and sending it. Maybe we have another class to do all of that work in the background. So given that, let's take a look at our application and see how we might implement this basic structure in our C# Visual Studio Windows Forms application. In the next video, we're going to look at the code and see how we might want to put this together. So see you in the next video. Thanks.